It is in the deepest reaches of the Underdark where one could argue reside the most feared of creatures on the material plane or across the multiverse. Distorted terrors born of madness, alien beings that have breached into our world from the frayed boundaries between realities. You likely well know the type. Mind Flayers peeling mortal skulls like stubborn fruit rind, their own special form of knowledge transfer. Aboleths, ancient aquatic malignancies that predate even the gods and consider free will nothing more than a temporary glitch and one easily patched by their psionic domination. And Beholders, eye tyrants, dream masters of paranoia and kaleidoscope death rays, proof that too many eyes don't necessarily lead to better perspective, just more angles from which to disintegrate the overly curious. These are just a sampling of the Underdark's headliners of horror, if you will. We call them aberrations. And they are, almost across the board, a form of evil spelled with a capital E, driven by appetites and philosophies so alien to our world they make enslavement and genocide sound like words of social indiscretion. I say almost because amid the unknowable depths of the lower dark, there roams an aberration so contrarian it proves that even a family tree rooted in nightmares and madness still has that one weirdo cousin who shows up to the Eldritch family reunion wearing tie-dye, talking about good vibes, and who just wants everyone to get along. Meet the Flumph, a cosmic typo of aberrant alignment and the singular focus of today's Monster Lab. The absurdity of this aerial, alien-like jellyfish is really hard to overstate. Resembling a deflated, sentient whoopee cushion, the Flumph drifts listlessly about, seemingly without a worry in the world through some of the Underdark's most oppressive regions. It seems to wear a perpetual smile and is, well, almost cute. Its tiny eye stalk swiveling to survey all with a kind of eternal curiosity. Dangling from its semi-ethereal form are a tangle of delicate appendages, so lacking in menace I hesitate to call them tentacles, more like frayed nerve endings trailing this being of wanderlust. It seems to float in the air, just like, yet in complete contrast, to the beholder. What exactly is this strange creature that only gets more confusing as it unveils a rainbow of almost black-light neon colors? Not with malice or dread, mind you, but with its own inner touchy feelings. The living alien embodiment of a hovering mood ring. Talk about wearing your emotions on your sleeve. It is said that no one and nothing is perfect, be it gods, mortals, or anything in between. Everyone makes mistakes. A maxim apparently not bound to just the material plane. The Flumph's existence has long puzzled philosophers, while at the same time evoking snorts of laughter from seasoned adventurers. And we are told this aberrant being is often friendly to Underdark explorers, a good-natured beacon of prismatic light in an otherwise dark and hostile environment filled with the innocuous and the immoral. Yes, you heard that correctly, a lawful good aberration in the depths of the lower dark. Let that sink in for a moment. Talk about a unicorn level of rarity. Aberrations and evil go hand in hand, just like your DM describing something as indescribable, followed by the subtle roll of dice. So finding one that doesn't want to enslave, consume, or shatter your mind is an ontological absurdity on the level of finding a dungeon without a single trap, a rust monster with a steel allergy, or a vegan vampire. If you haven't figured it out already, this good-aligned, aberrant creature type, inhabiting one of the most evilly dominated locations on the material plane, is the ultra-rare exception to the rule within its possible far realm lineage. The ancient wizard of the realms, only known as X the Mystic, wrote long ago in his 7 rules of survival that one should, quote, trust a Flumph, end quote. Sound advice? Maybe. While I personally still have doubts, concerns that I will save for a future D&D Declassified, the established lore is very clear on the subject. The Flumph is both good-natured and benevolent. And since we are in the Monster Lab, I will push my own reservations aside for the sake of science. So put your mask on, come closer, and let's see what makes this little guy tick. Okay, let's talk about the evolution of the Flumph. Flumph. Why does the name alone always remind me of that sound your dryer makes when full of wet laundry? No matter. Despite what those seasoned adventurers might say, the Flumph is not a creature to be snickered at. Oh no, and in today's Monster Lab, we're going to strap this cute little aberration to the examining table so we can peel back the lore and take a look inside. Metaphorically, of course. Please don't actually peel a Flumph. There's precious little there, and it would be terribly impolite. Besides, dissecting the Flumph's physical form is less an exercise in biology class and more an exploration of the historical record to determine just how whimsy became so entangled with cosmic horror. It's a study in the most improbable of far realm engineering. And to begin that study, we must start with the Flumph's own genesis and its journey through the many versions of history and lore. The documented proof that this absurdity actually exists among the many dungeons and dragons of our forgotten realms. The Flumph is one of, if not the best example of a paradox within the myriad of D&D bestiaries, a contradiction seemingly birthed of a far realm fever dream that apparently decided that the cosmic void lacked sufficient quantities of comical cuteness. But let's be clear from the outset, this saucer-shaped psionic tattler shouldn't exist, and yet here it is, having been with us for over 4 decades. Its bizarre legacy began at a time when the creature type of aberration had not yet even been discovered within the D&D literature. The year was 1981, and the Flumph would emerge in the Fiend Folio for the first edition of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, and did so as a lawful good creature with only the bare minimum of lore. The Fiend Folio, a tome already notorious for scraping the barrel of sanity with creatures bearing such quirky names as the Buka, the Umplebee, and the Gorebell, found in the Flumph a perfect mascot for its peculiar collection of creature oddities. And it was that first unveiling of this would-be aberration that established the core blueprint of weirdness that the Flumph would carry forward over all future versions of the lore. This included its semi-transparent white hue, the odd saucer shape of its form, tiny twin eye stalks, a noxious defensive spray, and the creature's mass of jellyfish-like but highly acidic tendrils that almost seemed to misrepresent its lawful good nature. The softer, more vulnerable underside of the OG Flumph carried a collective of small, hardened spikes obscured by its flowing tendrils, and that held meaningful purpose in its early role as a not-so-apex predator. In what may come as a bit of a surprise to those only familiar with the 5e manifestation of the Flumph, those vintage versions of the creature were active and, dare I say, gruesome hunters of small prey across the forever night landscapes of the Underdark. By incorporating those aforementioned spikes, the Flumph would illustrate its unique mechanism of the hunt by rising up to 10 feet in the air, centered above their intended meal. Now locked onto its target, usually consisting of rodents and small amphibious or reptilian quarry, the Flumph would then execute a rapid drop attack, their spiky underside impaling their prey, followed by the injection of acid from its tiny tentacles into the wounded critter. Not exactly the cutest form of feeding, but hey, the thing's gotta eat, right? The final facet of lore provided by the Flumph's Fiend Folio debut gave us a basic overview of the creature's mobility, particularly its method of flight. Described as purely mechanical, the Flumph remained airborne through a combination of its light weight and the vacuum mechanics of sucking air through its top mouth and expelling it underneath, providing the necessary thrust to hover and/or propel itself. This type of mobility, however, would create what has become the trademark Achilles heel of the Flumph, and one that, while revised over time, is still present to this day. Should the Flumph be somehow flipped upside down, the creature would find itself comically helpless. which begs the question if Underdark explorers ever pranked the little guys with the fantasy variant of cow tipping. If you know, you know. The Flumph would remain in its awkward introductory form for the entirety of the first edition as well as the better part of the 2E lore. It would not be until over 14 years later, well into Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition, that in December of 1995, the Flumph returned to print, finally making an appearance in the Monstrous Compendium Annual Volume 2. There, as well as on the pages of Dragon Magazine number 246 3 years later in 1998, would see the Flumph fleshed out more substantially as we learn many new facets of the creature's physiology. The Ecology of the Flumph article in that edition would finally give the poor creature a break, introducing its innate anti-gravity field as a form of propulsion, relegating the previously described mechanical air jets to the less strenuous role of maneuvering, kind of like tiny biological thrusters used for course correcting. This change resulting in a Flumph no longer reliant on sucking wind to move about the darkness below, and giving this flying friend to the blue-collar adventurer a sliver more dignity to go with its increased mobility, yet doing so without mitigating its upside-down, turtle-like vulnerability. Additionally, we find insight telling us that the Flumph's 2 eye stalks each move independently, are retractable, have infravision, and in the event one or both are severed off, they grow back in about a week. The Flumph possess no eyelids, so they can never close their eyes, forcing them to sleep eyes open. This of course makes them harder to surprise, but also more susceptible to any light-based attacks. The 2E lore would also expand on the Flumph's dietary and hunting habits, perhaps more than we would have liked. While the first edition particulars of the creature's predatory disposition could be summed up along the lines of unpleasant but well within nature's cycle of life borders, the second edition saw fit to double down on the details, elevating the dietary routine of our disarming little aerial jellyfish from unpleasant to downright stomach churning. A method that I think, looking back, we can safely say scholars and sages of later texts would come to regret. This is all found in the second edition text that confirm for us that the Flumph lives on the worst of all liquid diets. In a charisma-reducing process that would make even the Spider Queen Lolth herself flash a wicked smile, it's revealed that the digestive process of the Flumph is pretty far from the lawful good norm, and in fact quite similar to that of a spider, requiring its meals to be pre-liquefied inside the victim prior to our new friend drinking its meal. The emerging carnivorous details inform us that once the Flumph drops down to spear its prey, it then holds the future meal in place with a few tentacles, while those not restraining the impaled critter then inject the potent acid that begins the gruesome culinary meal prep of organic liquidation. When complete, the dissolved nutrients would then be slurped up as a gooey, meaty smoothie. Yum. The texts of 2E would even offer an obscure hint to their possible origins through recorded observations in the wild. These showed a strong and consistent tendency for the Flumph to compulsively attack, kill, and liquefy rodents, even if they had just fed, always favoring such vermin over any reptile or amphibian alternatives. This has led many a scholar and sage to offer the hypothesis that Flumphs may have originated as creatures somehow bred specifically to control rat and mouse populations. Do with that what you will. The final aspect of gathered 2nd edition lore introduces a variant called the monastic Flumph that eschews the normal white hues in favor of colors ranging from pale yellows to bright dayglow greens. This more advanced variant does offer some quite interesting history and lore that, while out of the scope of this discovery, is something I plan to cover in a separate upcoming volume of study, 10 Things You May Not Know About the Flumph, which I will link down in the show notes when available. Moving to the 3rd edition, the lore offers no real love for the Flumph and is represented only through Dungeon Magazine number 118 from 2005, as the Flumph did not make it to any core books in 3E or 3.5. Regardless, the text on those pages did refine our understanding of the Flumph's locomotion, first retaining the 2E discovery of anti-gravity, along with confirming its ultralight form, playing the role of a parachute, allowing it to glide on the most gentle of breezes. 3E would also swap the infravision for dark vision, completely remove the Flumph's sense of smell, but add the ability for it to speak celestial. Additionally, their size would change from tiny to small, as well as providing a better understanding of the dynamics within their social structures, existing in small families of 3 to 6, or even a tribe of those families to further increase their communal numbers. But the most impactful change in the 3rd edition Flumph was not found in its biology, but instead the lore of its origins, when scholars finally provided the first official classification designating the Flumph within the creature type of aberration. This modification further solidifying the Flumph's possibly nefarious connection to the far realm. 4th edition all but mocked the creature, doing nothing to further our knowledge of the Flumph, as the 4E text would, for all intents and purposes, put the creature on the shelf to gather dust, offering no legitimate new lore or even publishing the creature in its books. The lone exception to this was an April Fool's online article, likely considered an insult to Flumphs everywhere. The evolutionary changes seen thus far across the early editions of lore are best described as a transformation not of power but of personality, as the Flumph prepared to enter the lore of the 5th edition, which would bring about its most impactful of changes. As we brace ourselves for the Flumph's 5th edition Technicolor glow-up, where things somehow get even weirder, let's take a quick sanity break. Staring too long into the depths of aberrant lore can have, well, let's just call them side effects. Consider this re-establishing your tether to reality, while also allowing me a moment to kindly suggest that if you enjoy this type of content, perhaps take a second or two to like, subscribe, and enable notifications. And just consider checking out my Patreon and its growing library of volume art and world-building resources. You can join for free, and links are below, along with access to our channel Discord and Buy Me a Coffee donations. It is only through the generosity and kindness of my channel members and patrons that this content exists, and I cannot thank you enough for your support, but I will keep trying. Thank you for your patience. I know ads are meh, but I gotta pay the upkeep on this monster lab of the bazaar somehow. Okay, support asked, paranoia levels slightly adjusted, and medieval bill collectors kept at bay. Now let's get back to the slab. With the traits and lore uncovered in the 5th edition text, we would finally begin to understand the true nature of the Flumph. The first of these 5e findings confirms that the creatures actually communicate through psionic telepathy, although not in the sanity-shattering manner of most other aberrations. This not only helps explain why they reside in the Underdark, but also significantly changes their role there, allowing the Flumph to overhear and communicate with the likes of Mind Flayers, Beholders, and Aboleth, amongst many others. This, along with their official creature type classification as an aberration brought about in the 3rd edition, brings the Flumph much closer to the far realm connection and perhaps origin that is suspected by many. Their newfound telepathy also accommodates a biological shift to better align with a desired modern perception of the Flumph, shedding completely its previously established hunting practices in an effort to restore, or perhaps create, a cuter and more approachable version of the Flumph. This PR spun Flumph now nourishes itself exclusively as a passive parasite, not on brains, souls, or even those Underdark vermin, but through its own stealthy, yet mostly harmless, psionic siphon, emphasis on mostly. This ability allows the Flumph to feed on the mental energy of other psionic creatures, which is why they are often found in the same places where illithid, aboleths, and the many other psionic creatures dwell. And chances are pretty good that you'll find many in and around the lower dark illithid cities and outposts, for example. So gone is the gruesome manner in which they hunt and kill prey, and I guess we're expected to simply forget the creature's manic obsession with killing rodents. Okay, but I must point out here that for all the plushy-inspired charm given to this modern incarnation of the Flumph, it was a most feral carnivore for most of its life. So let's not forget that prior to this 5e disclosure, our cute pal here was far less family-friendly, especially when it came to its liquid dinners. Needless to say, with 5e, gone is the Flumph's underside of impaling spikes, having evolved where each of the Flumph's tentacles now have a few spikes attached, a modern evolution. So the question we must now ask, is this really a new 5e discovery, or some deep state far realm propaganda? More to come on that question in a later volume, but for now, I will let you decide. Regardless, this new dietary discovery comes with a new set of costs. Nourishing themselves through this psionic energy also reveals the thoughts and emotions of the host from which the Flumphs feed. Since the overwhelming majority of those hosts are evil, Flumphs are often subjected to terrible, nefarious thoughts, emotions, and hungers that corrupt their own good nature. Imagine your mind being constantly fed the inner monologue of an illithid knowledge master, contemplating the many gruesome ways the brain can be extracted, or an aboleth plotting the enslavement of an entire coastline. It's a psychic diet of pure, unadulterated evil that sickens the Flumph's mind. And it is because of this that Flumphs are so quick to seek out good-aligned creatures, including top-side explorers such as yourself, to eagerly share the many dark secrets they've gleaned. Scholars theorize that this may be the only hope the Flumphs have of purging the psychic filth from their minds. By dumping the toxic evil on someone else, explorers, such as you. So it's far less about altruism or the inherent inability of these cosmic tattletales to keep a secret, and more a desperate need to cleanse their own conscience. Something to consider in your own Underdark encounters with these adorable, not quite pocket-sized, potential allies. Moving on to more colorful of changes, literally, perhaps the most noteworthy 5e discovery is also certainly the most noticeable. Gone are the white hues that colored, or technically didn't color if you want to be pedantic about it, the Flumph's jellyfish-like body, now replaced by a rainbow of vibrant shades and tints that shift depending upon the creature's mood. Pink for amusement, a range of blues and teals for joy, sadness, and even serenity. Highlighter yellow when something piques its interest, orange when it's confused, purple when it's scared, and the pulsing of red, the Flumph's crimson warning when evils are near or its own anger arises. And the lore even tells of an ultra-rare magenta color, noted by scholars as an indication of an emotion for which there is no human equivalent. This chromatic display is said to be tied to their new psionic sensitivity, giving us a window into their simple yet deeply emotional souls. There are other 5e changes. Flumphs are and have always been asexual and reproduce by budding 1 to 8 tiny young on their underside every 2 years. Their young reach maturity within a single month, and typically each lives around 20 years on average. And finally, the 5e Flumph no longer has any sort of anti-gravity ability, back to the simple mechanical air thrusters, the sound of which is confirmed to be the origin of their name. Although Flumph still sounds like a dryer full of wet clothes, if you ask me. The Flumph still hides a few more deeper secrets, but this monster lab has already exceeded its planned length. Shocking, I know, but that's my eternal cross to bear. I must confess, though, I had only a modest understanding of the Flumph lore prior to my research, which would go on to yield so much more than I had anticipated. So, as I mentioned earlier, I'm currently working on a separate volume of Flumph Discovery called 10 Things You May Not Know, and it's all about some really obscure and hidden lore about this disarming little cosmic cutie. But as we close out this volume, what are we to make of the Flumph and its true role in the Underdark? Let's not forget the brass tacks here. It's an aberration, a classification reserved for cosmic horrors of a Lovecraftian nature. Yet the Flumph is said to be none of those things. It is a creature we're supposed to believe is of inherent goodness, yet sustains itself as a parasite of negative evil energies from the minds of some of the most depraved entities in all the lower dark. So, call me cynical, but let's just say I have some questions. Questions that I fully intend to investigate in a future D&D Declassified. But hey, maybe it's just me. Maybe this floating eldritch mood ring isn't secretly taking notes for the local Mind Flayer colony's adventurer brain buffet. Probably. Nonetheless, I think the one thing we can all agree on is that the Flumph is one of the weirdest damn things in the Underdark, and that's saying something in a place where fish have legs and godbrains rule entire cities. So, trust the Flumph? I don't know, man. Your call. But question the sanity of whatever spawned this thing? You'd be a fool not to.